Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. Following my duties in this House this afternoon, I shall have an audience of Her Majesty the Queen. I shall then continue with my duties in this House from the backbenches, where I will continue to be the Member of Parliament for Maidenhead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I profoundly disagree with many of the decisions the Prime Minister has made and many of the things she says. But I recognise that she does have a respect for public service and for the future of our country. So how does she feel about handing over to a man who, among many things, is happy to demonise Muslims, is prepared to chuck our loyal public servants and diplomats under a bus, and promises to sell our country out to Donald Trump and his friends?
I am pleased to hand over to an incoming leader of the Conservative Party and Prime Minister, who I worked with when he was in my cabinet, who... who is committed as a Conservative who stood on a Conservative manifesto in 2017 to delivering on the vote of the British people in 2016 and to delivering a bright future for this country.
Today marks the final day in office for the Prime Minister, and I pay tribute to her sense of public duty. Public service should always be recognised. Being an MP, a minister, or indeed a Prime Minister is an honour that brings with it huge responsibility and huge pressures, both personally and, I'm sure, the Prime Minister and probably the whole House would agree, on those very closest to us, who often are not able to answer back for the criticisms made against them. So I hope, Mr. Speaker, that she has a marginally more relaxing time on the backbenches, and perhaps, like the Chancellor, even helping me to oppose the reckless plans of her successor. Mr. Speaker, if I may continue, I'm glad the government party's in such good heart today, Mr. Speaker. For tomorrow they won't be. Mr. Speaker, in the last 3 years, child poverty has gone up. Pensioner poverty has gone up. In-work poverty has gone up. Violent crime has gone up. NHS waiting times have gone up. School class sizes have gone up. Homelessness has gone up. Food bank use has gone up. Does the Prime Minister have any regrets about any of those things I've just said?
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman, it's very good to see the Conservative Party in good heart, which is more than I can say for the Labour Party. Let me just tell the right honourable gentleman, let me just say something to the right honourable gentleman about my record over the last 3 years and how I measure my record over the last 3 years. It's in the opportunity for every child who is now in a better school. It's in the comfort for every person who now has a job for the first time in their life. It's in the hope of every disadvantaged young person now able to go to university. And it's in the joy of every couple who can now move into their own home. Because at its heart, politics isn't about exchanges across these dispatch boxes, nor about eloquent speeches or media headlines. Politics is about the difference we make every day to the lives of people up and down this country. They are our reason for being here, and we should never forget it.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister may have noticed that none of those things that I mentioned were actually in the Conservative Party manifesto in 2017, but every one of them was a Labour pledge in 2017. On Brexit, the Prime Minister's own red lines ruled out any sensible compromise deal. Only after she had missed her own deadline to leave did the Prime Minister even begin to shift her position. But by then, she no longer had the authority to deliver. Her successor has no mandate at all. Does she have confidence that the Right Honourable Member for Uxbridge will succeed where she has not?
Can I just say to the right honourable gentleman, I worked tirelessly to get a good deal for the UK, and I also worked hard to get that deal through this Parliament. I voted for the deal. What did the right honourable gentleman do? He voted against a deal, he voted to make no deal more likely, and when there was a prospect of reaching consensus across this House, the right honourable gentleman walked away from the talks. Stage, his only interest has been playing party politics. And frankly, he should be ashamed of himself.
We've had 3 years of bungled negotiations, and we now have the spectacle of a Prime Minister coming into office with no electoral mandate, looking for a Brexit deal that has been ruled out by the European Union, or in the case of a no deal, ruled out by the majority in this House and by anyone that understands the dangers to the British economy of a no deal. The next Prime Minister thought the Isle of Man was in the European Union and that the European Union made rules about kippers that in fact were made by the government that he was part of. He also said the UK could secure tariff-free trade through Article 24 of the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, despite the Trade Secretary, Attorney General, Governor of the Bank of England all confirming that is not possible. At the start of 2018, it's coming, don't worry. At the start of 2018, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister herself set up a new unit to counter fake news, charged with combating disinformation. How successful does she think that's been?
I have to say to the right honourable gentleman that I fear that our success hasn't been what we wanted it to be, from the amount of fake news and fake information he uses at that dispatch box.
Well, maybe, Mr. Speaker, she can have a word with her successor on the way out. But let me conclude by welcoming some for today. Mr. Speaker, let me conclude by welcoming some of the Prime Minister's notable U-turns over the last couple of years. The cruel dementia tax was scrapped. Plans to bring back grammar schools were ditched. The threat to the pensions triple lock was abandoned. Withdrawal of the winter fuel payments was dumped. The pledge to bring back fox hunting was dropped. And they binned their plan to end universal free school meals for 5 to 7-year-olds. The Prime Minister has dumped her own manifesto. Given that her successor has no mandate from the people, no mandate in which to move into office, doesn't she agree the best thing the Right Honourable Member for Uxbridge could do later on today, when he takes office, is to call a general election and let the people decide their future?
Answer to the right honourable gentleman is no. And if he wants to talk about people ducking manifesto commitments and commitments made during a general election campaign, can we remember what the Labour Party, the right honourable gentleman, said about student debt, going to abolish student debt after the election? No, he rose back on that promise, What did he say during the general election? He was committed to Trident. What does he say after the general election? No, he's not committed to Trident at all. He has broken promise after promise to the people of this country. But I say to the right honourable gentleman, as this is the last time that we will have this exchange across these dispatch boxes, I was going to say that it is the strength of our British democracy that the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition have these exchanges across their dispatch boxes every week at two swords' length. No quarter is sought and none is given. And that's as it should be in our adversarial parliamentary democracy. But he and I are very different people, and with very different politicians. I think we approach the issues we face in this country in different ways. I have spent all but one of my years in this House on the front bench trying to implement the policies I believe in. He has spent most of his time on the back benches campaigning for what he believes in, often against his own party. But what I think we both have in common is a commitment to our constituencies. I saw that after the terrorist attack in Finsbury Park Mosque in his constituency. But perhaps I could just finish my exchange with him by saying this. As a party leader who has accepted when her time was up, perhaps the time is now for him to do the same.